Good morning. We're learning as a schus for Shlema Pilan Chaya Baserach Bastian Baschaya. We're on Daf Kuf Yudalit Amid Beis, a little more than halfway up. Good morning, Rafal.
Good morning. Good morning.
By Amar Ravashi, it's about halfway down. There's two Amar Ravashis. This is the second one. Amar Ravashi, Minayin Lebasa B'Chala She'asa Ba'Achil. We have a couple of different limudim. We have always said, and you quote throughout Shas, that we know Basa B'Chalav is Aser B'Achila, but in Bishul and Achila and Hana. You can't cook it and you can't eat it once it's cooked, and you can't have Hana from it once it's cooked. And we always learn it out from the fact that the Torah says 3 times, and we're going to see that limud very soon, but the Gemara has other limudim. That's the classic limud, but there are others that are brought in the Gemara. Amar Vash, the Torah says you shouldn't eat anything that's a tayeva, anything that is prohibited. It tells you anything that the Torah said don't do. If you do it, it causes that there should be an isita achila. Since the Torah says you shouldn't cook basar b'chalav, so it implies, or it naturally follows, that is also an issa that you can't eat. So Rashi said it's only Rashi brought a raya for achila. How do you know you're not allowed to have any benefit from basar b'chalav? Could be avo. Amar bavo am belaza. Kol makom shenema lo yoichal lo yisoichal lo yiseichelu. Echad issa achila ve'echad issa hana b'mashma. He said it's a 2-step process. Kosher te'afti, whatever is aser to do, brings with it an isser achila. And once there's an isser achila, according to Rabavo, it also brings with it an isser hana. Achi yifel l'cha kasav, unless the Torah specifically tells you otherwise. Just like it says by nevela that there is no isser hana, Torah takes you out of the default that whenever there's an isser achila, is also hana. By nevela it says, but in nevela there is no isser hana. How do we see that? That he says, the Torah says that you should give your nevelas to a ger taishav, which is a guy who is makabel to live amongst the Yidden and be observant of the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach, and lo'evik keichavim b'mechira, and if you have an nevela, you should sell it to evik keichavim. Okay, we are on Kuf Yudalid Amud Aleph. We're saying an alternative source for the Isser Hana, Shkoich. So, the Isser Hana for Basa B'Chalav, the Isser Achila, we said, comes from the fact that anything that's also to do brings with it an Isser Achila, according to this Mandamar, and then anything that has an Isser Achila also has an Isser Hana. Unless the Torah tells you specifically. Otherwise, like it does by Nevela. By Nevela, the Torah tells you that you are allowed to have Hana. The Tanya. You shouldn't eat a nevela. You should give it to the ger. This is not talking about a ger tzedek, a ger who's a yid. It's talking about someone who's a ger taishav, who is a guy who's makabel to live in peace amongst the yidden and observe the sheva mitzvah. So to him, you should give it to him and he should eat it. Or you should sell it to a guy, which is to a non-Jew. Someone who's not the ger taisha. But you see that the nevela, there's no isra hana. The Torah says it directly. So the Brisa says, how do we know that you could even sell if you don't want to give to the ger taisha, but you want to sell it to him? You don't want to just give it to him as a gift. You want to make money on it. How do you know that you're allowed to do that? We dash in the pasuk. The pasuk said, "Loiseichlu kol nevela gersh b'shrecha titnana va'achla." Oy mechar l'nachi. So we dash in. Where do you put the comma? You could also put the comma after the oy mechar. So oy mechar is also going back on the ger taisha. How do you know that you're allowed to give it to an oy kechavim? You're not required to sell it. Tamad lema titnena oy machar lenachri. We could put the comma before titnena, and then it'll be titnena oy machar lenachri. Nimsa echad ger echad eved chav bein b'mechira bein mesira. Divi remei. This is all part of the same brisa. We already proved that point, but we are continuing to say what the brisa says. That's what Rebbe Meir's shita is. Even though the Torah seems to be saying you could either give your nevela, you could either give your nevela to a ger taisha, or you could sell it to a guy. Rebbe Meir darshans that it could really go either way. You could either sell or give to either one of them. Yehuda says, no, you are supposed to do exactly as the Torah said. The mitzvah is leger benesina la'eved kechavim b'mechira. You should give to a ger toshav, and you should sell to an eved kechav. My tayim with Rabbi Yehuda. What's Rabbi Yehuda's reasoning? He's agadach damer meir l'chter rahmana loy soichlu kol nevela ger shabasharecha titnena va'achla. Umachar. It shouldn't have said oy machar. It should have said umachar. Oy lamali. Why does it say oy machar? Shema minol devarim kiksavim hudasa, and the same would go for the other way around for the giving to the guy. And the fact that the Torah said it in this awkward way, and then we have to darshan each one that both the ger toshav and the eved kechavim, what seems the pashtup shot in the pasuk seems to be applying only the ger benesina and eved kechavim b'mechira. From the fact that Torah put it, the Torah should have said it direct. The ger benesina kechavim mechir. B'meir aymalach hi oil lahaktem nesina the ger lemechira eved kechavim. Meir, even though he says you have the choice, you can either give to the ger toshav or sell the nevela to a full-fledged eved kechavim, but it's still better to give to the ger. It's a mitzvah to help out the ger toshav. Svaru. The Torah says that you are supposed to support the ger amongst you. So there's no reason for the pasuk to tell you a drasha to tell you should give your nevela to the ger taishav. The Torah says directly that one should support the ger taishav. So it includes with it obviously giving a preference to giving to the ger taishav. So, but we're going back now. We had said that the beginning of this is all part of the original svara of Rav Ashi. Right? We had started by Rav Ashi said, how do you know basa b'cholav is asur b'achila? We said, lo soichol kol toyeva. Kol sheda'avtila charei b'bal toichel. Anything that the Torah says don't do, if you do it, you're not allowed to eat the product of what you've done. I think we're going to ask a bunch of kashas on this. It sounds like a very dodgy thing, right? We know this 613 mitzvahs, a lot of things you're not allowed to do. If we're saying that anything that produces food, it's going to be also that will have a lot of effects. Elamayat, Maisa Shabbos Litzer. If someone does, let's say, bishul on Shabbos, what is made should be also. Dati because it's something that the Torah says it's tayeva. To work on Shabbos is a tayeva. Now we all know you're not allowed to eat what's cooked on Shabbos, right? That's only a derabana. That's a gzeir takonas chacham. That's not a deraisa. Amakra ki kodesh hi lachem. Hi kodesh ve'ein maseh kodesh. There's mamash a pasuk that says that even though the Torah, Shabbos is kodesh and you shouldn't do malacha, but it's saying what you do on Shabbos is not kodesh. So this takonas chacham is mamash keneged a pasuk. The pasuk comes to tell you, otherwise you would have been asur b'achila according to Rav Ashi. And the Torah tells you you can eat it, and then the Chacham came and said, no, you can't. Someone who does plowing with a mixture of a shar chamar, which is asur. But someone who muzzles his ox as he's threshing, which the Torah says, you're not allowed to muzzle it. Litzeru, let's say whatever they produce. If someone is over and does these things, he does yokes together a shar and chamar, or he does muzzle the ox, whatever they've produced should be asur. according to this clause, this provision, that anything that's done through an avera is asur. But tiafti it's something that's asur. But hashnu ma Shabbos techamira. Ma'aseh mutarim. We had a pasuk by Shabbos that Ma'aseh Shabbos is mutar hani lekol shekain. This is Shabbos is misa, and these are just a lav. Certainly, if Shabbos you're not, what it produces is not asur. So this is also not asur. Klai is so therefore we say that it certainly can't be us. What about klai zoyim? So Rashi asked the obvious question. So now, if we're saying that if Shabbos is mutter, then everything, then lisachsum and chayrish b'shar b'chamor is a kal v'chaymer from Shabbos, that it's not going to be what it produces not also. Why don't we say the same by basa b'cholav? So Rashi hani lekolshkein a basa b'cholav lo yamin hay kal v'chaymer daksiv leisoicha kol shetiyavtel cha umistavra the sur the kra lea kama the achel te'eva gufa. It's more. We know that the Torah says there is such a thing. Te'evahi leisoicha kol shetiyavtel. So what would that apply to? The most likely thing is basa b'cholav, because the Torah said don't cook it. So what you're cooking, the basa b'cholav itself is the te'ev. In all these other isurim, the isur is somewhat removed from what you're from the avera. What you're not allowed to do is not the thing itself.
It's not the preparation of it.
Yes, like l'sachsam, you're threshing, and then later on you take the food that was threshing, but the threshing is the animal. You're not allowed to muzzle the animal. It's not in the grain itself. Okay. Gemara, klai zarim litzru. Let's say when someone puts together klai, there's two types of klayim. You could take together, let's say, a barley and a wheat and put them together. And the Torah says you're not allowed to plant them together. There's also klai hakerem, which you're familiar with. You're not allowed to put wheat together with a vineyard. So that when you put together wheat in a vineyard, when you plant wheat in a vineyard, then taka what's produced is asur to eat, and it's asur. I think it's asur b'hana. I'm not sure. I think it's only asur to eat. But klai zroyim, when you just put together two things, neither of which is klai hakerem, there's no isur to eat it. So why klai zroyim litzur dati yafti? You're not allowed to plant them together, but there's no isur achila. So since the Torah said legabe klai hakerem pentikdash pentukat eish, that if you plant klai hakerem, it will become kaddish. Kaddish, as we're going to see, is a very flexible word. Kaddish obviously means holy, but it also means separated, and it becomes asur. So you say if you plant klai hakerem, it's going to become kaddish, become separated, become asur. Pentu kadesh, then you're going to have to burn it. So it's going to be asur b'achil and b'hana. Mechlal the klai zayim sharu. But from the fact that the Torah has to tell you that the klai hakerem is asur b'hana, by says the klai zayim is not. Maybe klai zroyim, the reason why the Torah is telling you klai zroyim, you have to destroy it, is because it's asur b'hana, as opposed to klai hakerem is asur b'hana, as opposed to klai zroyim, which is only asur b'achila and not b'hana. But that's not the case. Klai zroyim is mutter b'achila. So ishkus klai behema. Klai zroyim, klayim of zroyim, of produce, is hukash. There's a hakish to klai behema. When you interbreed animals, you shouldn't interbreed different animals. And it also says you shouldn't interbreed. You shouldn't put together different seeds when you're sowing your field. Just like when you interbreed animals, if you do two kosher animals, what's produced, even though it's also to do, you do a sheep and a goat, if it's possible, and it produces offspring, that offspring is still kosher, and you're allowed to eat it. So by Yesada, Klai Zroyim, it's also going to be mutter b'achila, not just mutter b'ana. Uklai behema gufayu minalan. How do you know klayim of a behema, interbreeded kosher animals you're allowed to eat the offspring? But the asar achmana klayim ligvaya. From the fact that the Torah says that an animal that was produced from klayim, from an interbreed, is also to be brought on the mizbech. And the fact that the Torah tells you that it's also mechlal de lahedjit tzara. So there you see that it's mutter for a hedjit to eat. Let's say the Torah says you're not allowed to shecht an animal together with its offspring on the same day. Let's say if you do so, if you shecht it, litzer, the animal you shecht should to be awesome. From this, again, this is like our sixth question on this line of once we say anything that the maisa is awesome, what is produced is also asa. So why doesn't Aisha b'spinoi? Well, what's produced after the shechita should be asa. But the Gemara, the asa rachmana mechusas man legvaya, for the fact that the Torah says that if you have an animal that's not, typically this talks about if you have an animal that's within the first 8 days that it's not able to be shechted, you're not allowed to shecht an animal in the first 8 days after birth. And it's also l'gvaya. We also say that will also prove to Aisev Espenai that you're not allowed to shecht an animal with its offspring on the same day, but you could do it the next day. So we say that it's also l'gvaya. When it's mechusas man, we have to wait for the next day. It's also to be as a carbon. Mechlal de lahedjit shari. The fact that Torah has to tell you that this is asur, why don't we just say it's asur because it's asur b'achila, and then it'll be asur, I guess, salz mashki Yisrael, anything that's asur b'achila can't be brought as a carbon. And the fact that Torah has to tell you specifically it's also al mechusas man, vice that lahedjit oisev espenoi would be mut. Shiluch hakan litzer. Back to Gemara, let's say the Torah says you have to send away the mother in order to take the eggs. So let's say this is a little different than the other cases. We're suggesting when you let's see the Rashi shulach kan litzer going not alas me alabanim ubolafanenu v'chayvinu l'shalech because it's not like come on l'shalech ve'enu like to asal achila lamas to hanevda ba avera. If you took the aim alabanim instead of being mishalech, we should say that mother should be asa ba'achila. Lamas because it was an aver was done with. Zak Gemara le'amr Torah shalech le'takala. So I'm not exactly sure. Let me see the Rashi. Le'amr Torah shalech le'takala. The kanarei amr shalech. The Torah said to send it away. The chsiv le'sika chaim. V'hada shalach t'shalach. V'imlacha oisa chazor v'shalcha. V'imhoisa asura. If we were to say that the mother becomes asa because you took it off, so you set it free. So what are you going to say? You're going to say send it away, and now it's going to be asa to everyone. You're going to have a bird out there that anyone who takes it in the future is going to be nichshal in being over on the it's a culture tiyafti. It's asa b'achila. So therefore, that can't be. I mean, I'm not. What I'm wondering about is why can't it just be that you have to shecht it and throw it out? You can't eat it. You can't. There's what do you call it? You can't let it out, so you have to shecht it and throw it and get rid of it.
So you have to take the
it's
extra. You have to do the extra.
I say, but we're talking about where a case where you took the mother, right, and you never took the eggs. You did it wrong.
I think it's.
So we're saying it can't be that the mother's usher. Because now what are you going to do? You're going to send it out, and someone's going to take it and eat it. Why can't you just kill it? I'm not exactly sure why that's a takala. Yeah. That is the end. We got to the end of all the questions on Rav Ashi's svara that anything that's a tayeva, anything that you're not allowed to do, becomes aser b'achil. Now we're going to say a different svara of where the isser of basa b'chalav comes from.
We answered up all the questions on Ravashi.
Yeah, we went through all the different isurim in the Torah, why that could potentially have aser b'achil. Avarish Lakish, minayla basa b'chalav sha'as. He says a different svara. Talmud Laima al toichlu mimenu na. It says about the korban pesach, you shouldn't eat it while it's partially cooked, ubashal mavushal, or when it is fully cooked. What does the Torah just say? Like toichlu mimenu na umavushal. Why do you say ubashal mavushal, or ubashal? So why does it have to say double lashon ubashal mavushal? Not Talmud Laima mavushal. Laima l'cha yeshulcha bishul achar shehu kazef. There's another bishul like this where the Torah says don't be mavashal. The Torah says don't cook the korban pesach, and the Torah says don't cook basa b'chalav. So just like the korban pesach is, if you cook it, it's asa b'achila. So too basa b'chalav, if you cook it, it's going to be asa b'achila. Amalei Rabbi Yochanan chuarazu ka'urazu sheshana Rabbi. This, why did you pick to learn from korban pesach? What about Rebbe's drush? Rebbe has from a different pasuk. Pasuk says loiseich lenu bebasa b'chalav akasa medaf. The Torah says loiseich lenu gabi psuli hamikdashin. If someone has a korban that gets a mum, so the din is you set aside an animal for a korban. So the din is you have to then be paid it, and at that point that animal, you could shecht it and eat it. You can't use it for work, and you can't do. It's also a giza. You can't shear it, so it's not fully chullin, but it's no longer kosher. So loisay chalenu. It says rak hadam loisay chalenu ala artz shpechanu kamayim. But eksiv loisay chalenu l'man yidol l'dam. It says that you can't eat the dam of this psuli hamakdashin, but the Torah says in many places you can't eat dam. So what does it say? It's referring to basa b'chalav. Why are we picking basa b'chalav against as opposed to all the other yisurim in the Torah? Amrit say lamad miyud gimel mid shatar nedeshman davar alamad ben yoneh. What are we talking about over here? So Rashi has a pshat b'shnei minim. It's a very mechudishtik pshat. So we'll read it inside. Psuli hamakdashin. We're going to say we're going to compare psuli hamakdashin to basa b'chalav. Psuli hamakdashin shenivdu shnei minin heim. Psuli hamakdashin that was padi has two aspects to it. Mutar and ba'achila kechulin. In one sense, it's a mutar ba'achila kechulin. Basur b'gizav avayda kekachim. But it still has the isurim that has to be treated with respect. It's also in shearing and in working. Tizbach v'loy giza, basa v'loy so basa v'loy chalav. I don't know what the basa v'loy chalav is. So Taisus does not like this. Mutar v'achila kechulin v'asurim b'giza v'avayda ve'ein nira. The loy shayich mishum hachi the mikri shnei minim. That doesn't sound like two minim. The fact that it is two separate dinim. What does shnei minim means? Two different categories, two different species. Ela mishum nisgul tzvi va'ayil chashalu kashnei minim. Kedamar pek elay elak and Amrabi took Amravi ashar psulim makdashin loiko. Vayishin nami kamar. So it's called the shar va'ayil. So that in that sense, tzvi va'ayil. So in that sense, it's called shnei minim. Weiter in the Gemara.
So what's the point of the Gemara?
So we're asking a kasha. Rebbe, why did you say you learned out from Pesach? We compared Pesach to Basa B'chalav, and you learned out the Isser Achila of Basa B'chalav from Pesach. Why didn't you say like Rebbe that you learned it out from Psuli HaMikdashim? That was the question.
Got it.
It's just asked in this funny way. Chua Rezu Shoshana Rebbe? Yes. Is it something disgusting about or something lowly about what Rebbe said?
And how what does Shnei mean? So what's the point of that?
So we asked why would you learn out? What does Basa B'chalav have to do with Psuli Mikdashin? So he says Shnei Minim because they both are Shnei
And the
Minim.
Rashi
Basar Chalav is Basar and Chalav.
got it.
And over there, it's what either Rashi Pshat or Taisus Pshat or what the Shnei Minim is.
Got it.
It's both of the Shnei Minim Pshatim are a little, theoretical, conceptual.
And not Pasha, just by reading the Gemara.
Right. So Gemara. Right, the Gemara doesn't really say anything. It just says Shnei Minim. So Gemara, so we're back to the question, why do we learn out from Rebbe? Why did Reish Lakish say a different pshat? Why do we say like Rebbe from Psul Mikdash, and why do we say from Pesach? If you just learned from Psul Mikdash, it would only tell you it's Asa B'Achila. But Hana, you wouldn't know, because Psul Mikdash is not Asa B'Hana. Kamash Malam. The Rebbe B'Hana, I'm saying the dam is only Asa B'Hana. It's not Asa B'Hana. Rabbi Ba'no Mino. They tackle with his Rebbe who does learn out from this other pasuk. Where does he learn out that Basa B'chol V'Asa Ba'no? Nafkala Mehacha. Nema Kan Ki Am Kodesh Atal Hashem. Let's see the whole pasuk. Lo Soichlu Kol Navel Lager Shabasharechet Nerve Echalta Oy Machar Lenoki Am Kodesh Atal Hashem Lekacha, which is followed by Lo Savashal Gedi B'Chalevim. The pasuk of Nevela, which included the heter of Hana, was immediately followed by the Basa B'Cholav. And also says L'Yeh Kadesha B'nei Yisrael L'Yeh Kadesh B'nei Yisrael. This is the Isser of being of lack of tznius, which is either talking about being born a shivcha, or L'Yeh Kadesh means becoming a man, becoming a zayna. So, but all these things are Isser Hana. Right, any type of promiscuity is a hana issue. So it says kadosh by basa b'chalav, and it says la'yeh kadosh by someone who's mizana. So malam ba'ana avkan ba'ana, just like znus is hana, so too basa b'chalav also has hana. That's Rebbe's source. Fine. Now we're going to another source for the Isser Achila and Hana. The Be'er Belezer Tana Lo Soichlu Kol Nevela. Right, this is still that pasuk that said Nevela and then said Basa B'Chalav. Amra Tarek Shlu Kurana Loitiv Loshana V'Tin Kurana. That if you'll sell it, you shouldn't cook it and sell it. Loitiv Loshana V'Tin Kurana. The Torah said that by Nevela you could sell it, but by Basa B'Chalav it says you shouldn't cook it, and then you shouldn't sell it as well. It means the Torah said by Nevela you should sell, but by Basa B'Chalav you shouldn't cook it and you shouldn't sell. The Be'er Bishmal Tana Le'Savashal Gedi B'Chalevi My Gimel Pan. This is the classic limud. Like I said, I mentioned before, that whenever we talk about Basa B'Chalav throughout Shas, we always refer to this limud, even though we've seen a bunch of other ones. This is the final answer, even though we're going to see other pshatim. So he says Le'Savashal Gedi B'Chalevim. It says 3 times the pasuk of Le'Savashal Gedi. Echad le'Isser Achila, ve'echad le'Isser Ana, ve'echad le'Isser Bishul. One is to tell you can't cook, and one that you can't eat, and one that you can't have Ana. Tanya Yisib and Yudaim. Minayin l'basach Asr. We're going to still go on with more pshat, even though we came up with the one that's accepted throughout Shas. How do you know that Basa B'Chalav is Asr? Nemar kan ki am kodesh at. We said a lashon of kodesh. Nemar alon ba'anshe kodesh tianuli u'basa b'stei streifa loy teichlu. The pasuk says legabe treifa, an animal that has a treifa you can't eat, and we also have a lashon kodesh on that. Ba'anshe kodesh tianuli, you should be kodesh. Mal alon asr afkan asr. Just like it's also to eat a treifa, so too it's also to eat basa b'chalav. That only tells you achila b'hana minayin. Treifa is not also b'hana. So how do you know isra hana? Amrit kal v'chayim. We learn it from a kal v'chayim. Uma arla. So this is going to get a little deep into the technicalities of kal v'chaymers and b'matzads and such things. So Amrit kal v'chayim. Uma arla shalei nevda ba'aveira asura b'hana. If arla, which is the first 3 years after you plant the tree, you're not allowed to eat or be nana from its produce. And there was no Aveira done. You're allowed to plant trees. asura ba'na, and even so, it's also ba'na. Basa b'cholav shenevda ba'avera. The only basa b'cholav that's also to eat is when it was cooked together. It's only midrabanan that we don't eat a ham, not a ham and cheese, a pastrami and cheese sandwich. So basa b'cholav is only usher to eat after you cooked it together. So there was already an avera done. Ein edin she'asa ba'ana. Certainly, if arla is asa ba'ana, then basa b'cholav, you're only asa. It's asa to you. It only becomes asa after you cooked it together. So an avera it's already done. Certainly, it should be asa ba'ana. Arla is different. As soon as the fruit comes into being, it's always asa. So I'll prove it that the fact that is not a reason to be mater bahana, because chametz b'Pesach will prove it. Chametz before Pesach is muter bahana, and once Pesach comes, it's also bahana. So Isser Hana doesn't have to do lahaisel shasa kosher. You can't learn out from Karban Pesach because it has a chiv karas. So the Gemara says, instead of going back to Arla, the Gemara now goes and brings in, right, you could say, so let's say Arla should prove it, because it doesn't, it's not a Chayiv Karas, but the Gemara doesn't say that, for reasons that will become clear. So we say, no, let's prove that Anush Karas is not the reason why it should not be an Isser Hana, that there is Isser Hana, from Klaya Karen. When you mix together Zroya with vines, with grapes, she'ain anish karas. There's no karas for asabana, and even so, it's asabana. Okay, so that's the lima, right? We asked, let's learn out from Arla. We asked, but Arla didn't have a shasa kaisha. Chametz will prove it that had a shasa kaisha, and then we said, no, what about Karban Pesach? That had it was anish karas, so we proved it from Klaya. So it's a three-step process. It's very good to see you.
It's funny we picked anything that there's a shas. We said a whole list.
We have to have things that are asabana. We're trying to find things that are asabana. Not so many things.
Right. All that was the other client.
Those are all right. Other things are all things that were asur. Like we say they're not asur b'achila. So laisi kula back to Gemara. Lamali gzeira shava. Why did we start? We said a gzeira shava at the beginning to say the Isra Achila. Then we asked, and we said a Gzeir Shava from Treifa. Then we said, well, do we know how? No, we learn out from Arla. Once you're learning out from Arla with the Kal V'chaimer, let the Kal V'chaimer not just teach you Isra Hana, let it also teach you the Isra Achila and not need the Gzeir Shava. Umar Arla Shalin Evda Ba'avera, Asura Bein Ba'achil Bein Ba'al, Basa B'chal Shalin Evda Ba'avera, and then she also Bein Ba'achila Bein Ba'ana. So the Umar Mishum Deklamei Mechoirish B'shar B'chamar B'chaisim Pipara V'dash Ba'yechia. That we see, like we saw in the Amid Aleph, there are all these things. This is, I guess, an example of things that are, you do an Avera, and even so there's no Isra Achila. Shenevda B'an Avera Sharu. Okay, so that's the reason why we need a Gzeir Shava for Achila. And now we're going to ask another question. The question we had asked, so we had said, let's learn out from Arla. We asked the Kasha, we said, we learn out from Pesach. We asked the Kasha on Pesach, so we said, let's learn from Klai. So why do we have to bring in the third limud to tell you from Arla? After we said Arla and Pesach, we said Pesach is a problem, it's karos. So we said Klai Kerem is not karos. Why don't we just say that Arla is not karos and learn it out from a matzah from Arla and Pesach? Amar Rashi, if we would have learned out from those two, I would say Nevela will prove Shasur Bachilu Mutaris Bahana. Even though it's Asa Bachil, it's Mutar Bahana. So if Nevela, so how could you say learn out from Arla and Pesach, but Nevela proves that it's, even though it's Asa Bachil, it's Mutar Bahana. Kol Mehatzad Megufa Parchinan Me Amaloi Parchin. You can't ask a kasha on a Mehatzad and say we find something that's not that even though it's asur ba'achila, it's mutar ba'ana, and therefore that slugs up the me'atzad. You could ask a kasha in the me'atzad that the two things have something in common to which we can attribute the fact that it's asur ba'ana over there. But to say just that there's a counter example, that's not sufficient to ask, right? Whenever we have a matzad, the kasha on it always is that they both have a common element, which explains why they both are asab. No, but basab chalav doesn't share the common element. But to just say that there's a counter example,
right,
that there is such a thing as something that's asur b'achila and mutar b'ana, that's not sufficient to overcome a matzad. So how could you say that that's the reason why we didn't say from a matzad? So why taka don't we learn out from a matzad of just Arla and Pesach? So because if you would just learn as a matzad, it will be learned. You'll ask a perch on it that they have a common element that they're both gedulei karka. So now it's important to know gedulei karka is not really a pircha, that it's not a chumrah. It's just a common element that you could attribute it to, but it's not a chumrah or a kula. So what does it help to add klaya karim and say that? But that it also has that same common element. Whenever you have a matzad, you could ask a koldu. You could say that anything that's a common element is enough to ask on it. So enochanami, the fact that it's gedulei karka would be a sufficient question.
Yeah, but
loyim amarta kavachoymer parchina koldu loy parchina. But if you're learning out from something, if you're saying you're learning out from klaya kerem, the klaya kerem, it's a limit from klaya kerem. It's not a matzad. So you can only ask it that if there's a chumrah in it, then because we're not making a matzad with klaya kerem. We're saying klaya kerem proves, we're doing it directly. Klaya kerem proves that you could have a isser hana that's not chayiv karas, that I'm sorry, isser achila, it's not chayiv karas, that has an isser hana. So that you have to ask a kal v'chomer. Just saying that there's a common element is not enough to ask him. The Gemara asks, so but why should it be different? Why don't you say that all of them?
It's
gedulei karka, just like meiser and just like chametz. El amalei ramad chiler vashi hakar min mishmei derish lakish. Chada michala chada kula v'chumra pachina. Chada michala kula v'chumra pachina. Kol du loy pachina. When you learn out one thing from one thing, then you can ask a kula and chumra, but you can't ask a pircha koldu. Chada mitarti afilu koldu pachina. But when you're learning a me'atzad, then you can even ask a koldu. You don't have to come on to a kavachema. Chada mitlas. If it's set up as a matzad, you're learning all three things as a matzad, that if you're going to ask the kasha, I'm going to answer you like this, then you don't have to have a kal v'chomer to slug it up. It's just any nominal distinction. But in this case, where we didn't say we'll learn it a matzad from klaya karim, but rather we said klaya karim is a raya. We said klaya karim shows is going to be the source together with Korban Pesach that you are there is a isser hana even on something that doesn't have a chiyuv kares. So in that case, you have to have a chumrah of Pesach together with klaya karim to justify why you don't learn out basav v'chal. But we do have a kal v'chomer. And shas hakoshim. Klaya karim does have a kula, a chumrah that makes it justifies why it has isra now, because it was never also klaya karim as soon as it's planted is also. Klaya karim ikr nesa b'hoisel and shas hakoshim koydem hashrosh. This comes to tell you that no, that klaya karim does have a part of it, that what grew before you planted the second seed, that was mutter at that point, and then when you planted the second seed next to it, then it got that what was planted earlier became us. Masar Shmai Bazir is that true? If someone carries over a pot with a plant in it over a keren, so it somehow draws sustenance from the earth. The water evaporates and goes into the pot. So im hoisef masayim also. If you left the pot over with which was one the pot, let's say, was holding barley, and on the ground was growing wheat. If it grows to 1/200th while it's passing over the field, also it becomes also hoisef in lay hoisef lay. It's masha only if it increased, but what was there before doesn't become converted to become also. So you see, it's not that what's there is converted. So therefore, l'chayre, it's not. It's something that hoisel shasa kasher, because what was kasher remains kasher. Rabbi Trek Triksi Ksiv take the Shamaleya. The Torah says maybe you'll when you do on Klai Zroyim, it says you're gonna answer what grew. Uksiv Hazera. It says the zera itself. Okay, it said Zerua meikara v'hashrasha. Zerua ba v'haisef in loy haisef loy. If they were zerua together, then as soon as it plants, it becomes us. Zerua ba haisef in loy haisef loy. But if you planted one thing and then you planted another, what increased becomes us, and what didn't increase not. So therefore, we do have a case where it has an isser before that. That it has an isser before that later becomes mut. Okay, we're going to stop over here.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Good day.